mathematics, if you like, but mathematics in itself is harmless. Mathematics is just it's like a calculator, you know. You give it a problem and it gives you an answer. And that's great that we've developed mathematics, or the human race has developed mathematics, so you can give complex problems and get correct answers. But as a physicist, as the computer engineers and the computer programmers used to say, garbage in, garbage out. And where mathematics attaches itself to the analysis of reality, if I might call it that, we have a problem. And that problem is in the realm of physics. Because in the realm of chemistry, and in the realm of biology, and engineering, and electronics, you don't get very far unless your theories actually produce something that works. So if you mix a green liquid with a blue liquid and get a red precipitate, that will always happen so long as you do that. But what physics tries to do is it tries to analyse all this. It tries to analyse all of this universe in terms of mathematics. And when it tries to do that, it falls down, it cracks up. And I'll come to that. But first of all, let's consider the physicists. I've met an awful lot of physicists since I've been doing this work on ionising radiation and health. And I have to say that the ones that work in this area, and a lot of them call themselves health physicists, are a pretty dumb bunch. They are not at all really scientists. They're more like technicians, I guess. They apply equations that somebody else hands them, they read books and they follow rules. And these rules are laid down by theories which eventually track back to people like the International Commission on Radiological Protection. And those are the people who apply physics to living systems. Well, of course, you can't apply physics to living systems. And that's a problem. So I've talked about this until you're all bored to death about it. But I'm more interested in the physicists themselves. Because what physics has done in this last century, not the one we're in now, but the previous one, is it's taught human beings to give way to impossible ideas on the basis that they must be right, on the basis that mathematics says that they're right, to admit that they're not clever enough to understand what the physicist is telling them. Or very few people have the inner strength to believe that the physicists are wrong. And there are two major areas in which the physicists tell us stuff which is actually offensive to common sense and offensive to everything that we know about how the world works. It's totally insane stuff. And these two areas are relativity and quantum theory. I used to teach quantum theory, so I know about quantum theory, and I'm not going to talk about quantum theory. Actually, quantum theory you can deal with. That's not such a big deal. But what is a big deal is relativity, because what relativity has handed us is such a load of nonsense that we are forced to believe, and that the physicists now still believe, despite the fact that they've been totally unable to understand the universe as interpreted through relativity. And that's what they do. They interpret the universe through relativity. So they look out there with their telescopes and they see all these stars and they apply relativistic equations. And what do they find? They find that the universe doesn't make sense. But not slightly, not like some small amount of not making sense, but a gigantic amount of not making sense. They've lost about 90%, I believe, of all of the matter in the universe. They don't know what it is. They call it dark matter, but they don't know what it is. They can't find it. And then now they've lost a load of energy as well, so they call it dark energy. So there's this frantic search for dark matter and dark energy. Anybody coming along and looking at this from the outside would fall about laughing. But they aren't falling about laughing. They're dragging down huge amounts of money in research funds to make enormous telescopes to look even further into the universe, to see if they can find this dark matter. And every now and again they find some tiny little piece of information which makes them realise that even where they are now is not anywhere real. But nobody decides to go back and see what the problem is. Well, here's the problem. The problem is relativity. And I'm not going to go on endlessly about it, but a number of people have drawn attention to the problems of relativity, so I'm going to say a little bit about it, these problems, and then you can go away and think about it, or talk to your favourite physicists about it. Whenever I meet a physicist at a party, I hand in one or two of these ideas, and they get so angry. They get so angry, they won't speak to me. They huff and they puff. They can't answer these things. So there are three paradoxes that I'm going to hand you about relativity. Now, what relativity has handed us is these impossible concepts of space-time and curved gravitational fields and bendy universes and that dimension and all these dimensions. Okay, well, let's forget the dimensions for now, but just remember that what the physicists had taught us after Einstein was that there was a lot of very clever stuff there that we couldn't understand. And that it resulted in ideas that were impossible, but we had to believe. And this is where physicists always start. This is what they're taught, and it makes them feel clever. This is the point. It separates them from everybody else. So they think, I am a physicist, I know about space-time continuums. Total impossibilities. And in fact, a number of people have pointed out how impossible they are. And a lot of physicists around about the time of Einstein never believed in the theory of relativity, special relativity, which is the basis of the general relativity theories, invented the equations, in fact, that Einstein used in order to explain the observations, and we'll come to the observations briefly too. But let's give you these. So we started with this idea that the physicists have been able to snow everybody with the idea that they can say anything, and because we are not physicists, we're not experts, we're not mathematicians, and I am incidentally able to deal with this mathematics. But because of this, we somehow can't argue. And this is why these people who are politicians are frightened of. And this is the twins paradox. The equations of relativity, of special relativity, will tell you that if you go close to the speed of light, all sorts of strange things happen. And everyone will tell you that from the equations that you're sitting on the Earth and there are two twins, one remains on the Earth and the other one whizzes off at a tremendous speed and comes back. They will have aged. The one that whizzes off will be younger than the one that stays on Earth when he comes back. Okay, this is what the equations tell you. But since there's no preferred, so this is the paradox, okay? Because everybody swallows this bollocks. The twin goes off and then comes back and he's younger than the second twin. That immediately introduces an asymmetry into the system. And if you step back from that, you're not allowed to put in an asymmetry in the system according to Einstein's first postulate, because there's no preferred reference frame. So there's no reason, okay? So the one that flies off from Earth at huge speed, it cannot be considered necessarily to be a preferred twin. So he doesn't age at a less rate than the one on Earth, because if you consider it from the other point of view, that the Earth twin moves off on the Earth away from the other guy at 186,000 miles per second, he becomes the chosen twin, just on the question of deciding which twin to put into the equation. You see what I mean? It's just absolutely to do with the mathematics, what you put in at the beginning. So he's the one that is younger now. Well, they can't both be younger, can they? I mean, that's impossible. Alright, second paradox. The second paradox I prefer, I mean, partly because I invented it. It's called the shotgun paradox. Now, you must, if you know anything about relativity, what you have to know is that if you're measuring the speed of light in any reference frame, you always get the same answer. This was Einstein's first postulate, so it doesn't matter how fast you're going relative to something else, it's small. Okay, so back to the shotgun. Just imagine an over and under shotgun. You've got two very long tubes, not really a shotgun, okay, but anyway, it's like a shotgun. So these are two very long tubes which are connected to each other, welded, if you like, welded to each other, one over the top of the other. The lower tube is focused on a light source on the Earth. This whole thing is sitting on the Earth. And the upper tube is focused on a distant star, which we assume that the Earth is moving towards or away from. It has a velocity relative to this distant star. So light from the distant star travels through the upper tube, and light from a light bulb travels through the lower tube. This is a thought experiment, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to chop the beams with a chopper. So we're going to start them and stop them. So we're going to switch them on, switch them off, just by putting a piece of cardboard in the way, if you like. And so then when we switch them on, the light will get the light will shoot down the tube, and then we measure the time it takes to get to the end of the tube. Now, obviously, since the light from the distant star is travelling with a different velocity relative to Earth than the light on the Earth, because the star and the Earth are moving relative to each other, in order for the measurement on Earth to be made in such a way that that light has the same velocity, because of course we can't have a different velocity. In all reference frames, remember, all the light speeds are always the same. So in order for the light from the distant star to have the Earth light, the upper tube contracts according to the velocity of the Earth relative to the star, and it contracts by the equation, the Lorentz equation. So if you keep chopping this, now of course you know that if the top one contracts, the top tube contracts because of the Lorentz contraction, and the bottom tube doesn't contract because there's no Lorentz contraction, you've got like a bimetallic strip, so they have to move. They have to bend like this relative to each other. Okay? And so what we then do is we chop the beam with a chopper, chop, 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 and that makes it bend at the same rate as the chopper. And it whips backwards and forwards, and then we connect that to a piezoelectric crystal, and we generate electricity. Or something like that. We get useful work. We get useful work out of measuring the speed of light. Isn't that great? Of course, that contravenes the first law of thermodynamics. And so what you've done here is you've absolutely put Einstein, you've put the special relativity up against thermodynamics. Now, nothing contravenes the laws of thermodynamics. That's it. For physicists, anyway. So when physicists have the laws of thermodynamics put up against the laws of relativity, their heads explode. So that's what you've got to do at the next party when you talk to a physicist, all right? Anyway, this is quite entertaining, but also it's really quite serious. It's as simple as that. Isn't that extraordinary? Extraordinary. And how do we know that? Because somebody else did. A chap called Miller in America did an enormous series of experiments with all sorts of interferometers on the top of Mount Wilson. He was funded by the Chase, of Edward Chase, I think he is, of the Chase Manhattan Bank, rich guy. He put tents on the top of mountains. He measured the speed of light using every possible system, and what he found with an enormous and clever series of experiments is that there is an ether, and that the Earth is moving through the ether at a significant velocity. To me, it's an extraordinary story, and all it tells me is that the whole of the physical understanding of the universe is nonsense. It's just nonsense. And yet these people still hold sway over the minds of you and me, and the minds of the politicians. And they're still able to tell us on the basis of mathematics that we should do this and we should do that. It's such, the perils that I wanted to talk about are the perils of assuming that physicists know what they're talking about, because they don't. They don't know what they're talking about. They're stupid. They have made themselves stupid in some curious way by embracing mathematics. And all that mathematics can do is it can deal with what you put into it. And because what you put into it very often is wrong, or very often is oversimplified, because it's just taken as a little bit out of reality, and then it gives you an answer about that little bit, and then all it does is it tells you something that actually may not be the answer to your question. And in the case of ionizing radiation, which is where I come in, it isn't. Anyway, here we are on my little boat.